A man is rushing with a client's $7 million bail money. Jimmy thought he could easily earn $100,000 commission, but halfway through, he was stopped by 3 off-road vehicles, and the robbers were all loaded. They quickly surrounded Jimmy. As a lowly lawyer, Jimmy had never seen such a scene before, and he was scared out of his wits. The head robber, Chief, signaled Jimmy to get out of the car. Jimmy had no choice but to comply. He raised his hands nervously and tried to explain in broken Spanish that he was a lawyer. However, the robbers didn't care who he was. They just wanted to take the $7 million ransom. After confirming the cash was fine, Chief immediately ordered his men to kill the lawyer, facing imminent death. Jimmy was terrified out of his mind, but just as Jimmy was about to be killed, there was a swoosh, and blood splattered all over him. The one who died was the person about to kill Jimmy. Realizing there was a sniper, the robbers immediately became vigilant. As the second robber was shot dead, they started shooting wildly, but it was all in vain because they had no idea where the sniper was. Chief, out of ammo, tried to escape with the money but was shot dead in one hit. The mysterious sniper's bullets hit the enemy's vital points with precision, and soon there was no more movement from the group. Jimmy hid beside the car, not daring to move, fearing he would be shot too. From under the car, he saw a pickup truck approaching. It seemed this person was also after the money. Jimmy picked up a gun from the ground for self-defense, but the bullets were already used up. At this moment, one of the robbers, who hadn't died, started shooting wildly at the pickup truck, covering his escape. Mystery Man got out of the truck and saw that there was still one more survivor and shot him again. Then the man walked toward Jimmy, who was too scared to lift his head. Unexpectedly, the man didn't intend to kill Jimmy but instead asked if he was hit. The voice sounded familiar. The terrified Jimmy slowly raised his head. To his surprise, the mysterious sharpshooter was his old acquaintance, Mike. Knowing he was so skilled, he never should have crossed him back then. Mike helped the frightened Jimmy up, told him to take a moment, and went to clean up the battlefield. Jimmy held back his tears. Mike noted the tattoos on the robbers' bodies, then picked up the $7 million in cash to put it in his truck. But to Mike's surprise, his car had been hit in a critical spot by the last fleeing robber, rendering it inoperable. Just as Mike was frowning in frustration, he spotted Jimmy's car keys. Although Jimmy's car had also taken a few bullets, fortunately, Mike managed to start it up. It seemed the two would have to rely on this beat-up Suzuki to get home. However, before they had gone very far, the car started to give out. Mike got out to check it out and found the engine had been shot. Even more desperate was the fact that, in this remote border area, there was no cell signal, so he couldn't call for help. Mike removes Jimmy's license plate. Then he removes the petrol cap because it's fitted with a tracking locator, and it's based on this that Mike saved Jimmy's life. This was also a common tactic of Gus's gang. To avoid revealing their situation, they needed to push the car into the ditch. Just when the car was about to be pushed into the ditch, Jimmy suddenly called a halt because he remembered that the cup of the world's second-best lawyer that Kim had given him was still in the car. Seeing the mug pierced by a bullet, Jimmy was heartbroken. Then the two of them pushed the car into the ditch together. To avoid being discovered by the enemy, Mike, who was skilled in wilderness survival, chose to take the small paths. Thus, the two walked for half a day, panting with exhaustion. Finally, they found a tree and decided to rest for a while. Seeing Jimmy's condition reminded me of Walter. Both were surviving in the wild, but Jimmy's situation was clearly much more dangerous. To conserve energy, Jimmy suggested they take turns carrying the $7 million in cash. Mike gave him a look that said impossible, and Jimmy had to give up. He came up with another idea, to dig a hole and bury the money here, then come back for it later when they returned to civilization. But Mike didn't think much of this idea. First, the coordinates of the buried money would be hard to find. Second, the ground here was very hard, and with just the car license plate, it would take ages to dig. But Jimmy didn't listen to Mike's advice and insisted on doing it. Just then, Mike saw a car approaching in the distance. He observed through his binoculars and confirmed it was the car of the escaping robber. Mike told Jimmy to stop immediately and remove anything reflective, as the enemy might spot them through the glint of light. Mike concluded that the enemy had found their abandoned car and started searching the area. For safety, the two had to quickly change their position. When they found a safe resting place, the thirsty Jimmy drank water in big gulps. Mike, beside him, reminded him to drink sparingly because in this godforsaken desert, lack of water is more dangerous than any enemy. With his rich experience in field survival, Mike found ways to collect moisture from plants and decided they should rest there for the night. As traveling at night would be extremely dangerous, Jimmy climbed to a high point, hoping his phone could get a signal, but he was ultimately disappointed. At night, Jimmy complained that he should have been home by now. He knew Kim must be very worried about him by now. Mike tried to reassure him, joking that Kim might think he was out fooling around, but Jimmy retorted that Kim would definitely think he was in danger because she knew about his mission. Mike inferred from Jimmy's words that he had told his girlfriend about what he was doing. Jimmy proudly corrected him, saying she was not his girlfriend but his wife. Mike congratulated him and then speculated that Kim might call the police, which would be a normal reaction to fear, but Jimmy knew Kim very well and assured him that she wouldn't call the police. Just worry. Hearing this, Mike felt sorry that Kim was also drawn into this mess. For Kim's safety, Jimmy adamantly insisted that she had nothing to do with any of this. The next day, just as Jimmy predicted, Kim didn't call the police. Instead, she posed as a member of Lalo's legal team to visit him. Kim wanted Lalo to tell her Jimmy's location. At first, Lalo was furious at Jimmy's betrayal, but when he learned that Kim was Jimmy's wife, he understood why she was so worried. Kim promised to abide by lawyer-client confidentiality, but Lalo didn't think it necessary to tell Kim anything. He believed Jimmy was tough and told Kim to go home and wait patiently. Meanwhile, Mike woke up and collected a bit of life-saving water. Seeing Jimmy about to relieve himself, Mike warned him not to waste it because the little water he had collected wasn't enough for the two of them. In the next scene, half a bottle of urine was hanging from Jimmy's waist. Thus, they continued their journey, resting when tired and sipping a tiny amount of water from the bottle cap when thirsty.
No, more. No. You want more?
Jimmy would rather die of thirst than drink his own urine. After a short rest, they continued on their way. Jimmy came up with a good idea to tie the two large bags of money together and drag them behind him. Unfortunately, the bags were of poor quality and soon developed a hole. Mike used Jimmy's license plate to cover the hole. Jimmy, who was picking up money next to him, was accidentally stabbed in the foot by a cactus thorn. He gritted his teeth and endured the pain to pull out the thorn. At this point, Jimmy was on the verge of collapse. He lay on the ground, saying he'd had enough. He wondered why they had to suffer like this when they were going to die anyway. Mike told him to have some homemade black tea, but Jimmy saw no point. Drinking it would only let others know he was a corpse full of urine. Mike encouraged him to get up, but Jimmy couldn't. Jimmy wondered how Mike could keep going, and Mike's words inspired him to regain his strength.
I have people. I have people waiting for me. They don't know what I do. They never will. They're protected. But I do what I do so they can have a better life. And if I live or if I die, it really doesn't make a difference to me as long as they have what they need. So when it's my time to go, I will go knowing I did everything I could for them. Now you ask me how I keep going. That's how.
Just then, Mike noticed a car approaching in the distance. Through his binoculars, he saw that it was the robbers again. Mike warned Jimmy not to move until the enemies left, but Jimmy, bolstered by Mike's pep talk, decisively picked up Mike's space blanket and draped it over himself to draw the robbers' attention, giving Mike a chance to ambush and kill them. Mike understood and quickly got ready. Jimmy's only motivation to stay alive was knowing he had a wife waiting for him at home. He couldn't let Kim become a widow. With his energy depleted, Mike's first shot missed. Seeing the car about to hit Jimmy, Mike took a deep breath and fired a second shot, hitting the car squarely. Their immediate crisis was averted. Mike checked the situation of the enemy. This time he didn't shoot again. It seems that the enemy is already dead. Unfortunately, the robbers' water bottles had broken during the vehicle rollover. Jimmy had no choice but to drink his homemade iced tea to stave off hunger. Though the taste was indescribable, it was his hope for making it out of the desert alive. His wife was waiting for him at home, and he still had to deliver the $7 million to the client. Seeing Jimmy regain his spirits, Mike felt reassured and slung his sniper rifle over his shoulder to continue their journey. The director puts Jimmy and Kim in the same frame. To see his wife again, Jimmy gritted his teeth and kept checking his phone for a signal in the desert. Kim, hoping for news from her husband, smoked through several packs and kept praying for Jimmy to call. Though they had temporarily lost contact, they were constantly thinking of each other. Fortunately, it wasn't long before Jimmy's phone got a signal, which delighted him. He immediately called Kim. Kim was overjoyed to finally hear from Jimmy.
Yeah. I'm okay.
Hearing Jimmy's voice, Kim choked up, and the weight on her heart was finally lifted. Jimmy and Mike reached the nearest service area and changed into clean clothes. Soon the rescue vehicle Mike contacted also arrived here, and it was Gus's men Tyrus and Victor who got out of the car. They called to arrange for the battlefield to be cleaned up and then briefed Jimmy on what to tell Lalo. In the next scene, Jimmy was carrying the $7 million to bail out Lalo. The staff checked and confirmed that the bail amount was $7 million. To her surprise, Jimmy directly brought up 2 large bags of cash. The staff used 3 counting machines to count the cash and still couldn't finish it. The police's defense attorney was stunned by this scene, unable to believe how rich this guy was. They thought $7 million would keep him in jail, but it ended up giving the prisoner a chance to escape. Since it took so long, Lalo wanted to hear Jimmy's explanation. Fortunately, Mike had coached him in advance. Jimmy explained that his car broke down on the way back. Considering that it is not safe to take the big road with $7 million, Jimmy chose to take the small road to the north, and then accidentally lost his way in the desert, which delayed the time. Lalo was initially skeptical, but hearing this made him feel better. He figured someone like Jimmy wouldn't dare lie to him. Jimmy's worried that Lalo's false identity won't stay hidden for long, and the police are sure to keep digging deeper, but Lalo wasn't worried at all. By the time the police discovered the truth, Lalo would already be back in Mexico. Lalo reassured Jimmy not to worry and said they would continue working together in the future. Before leaving, Lalo didn't forget to ask Jimmy if he received the $100,000 commission. Jimmy lifted his bag, indicating he had received it. However, Lalo's next words sent chills down Jimmy's spine.
So make sure you buy something nice for the wife. Man, she's a looker, huh?
My what?
Yeah, the weather, man. She came by to see me. Hey, nice job, eh?
Jimmy knows that Kim wouldn't call the police if she couldn't find him, but he didn't expect her to go to the terrifying Lalo. This meant Kim was now entangled in this dangerous mess as well. Back home, Kim thoughtfully prepared an oatmeal bath for Jimmy to help with inflammation. Jimmy warned Kim to stay away from people like Lalo. He was already involved and didn't want Kim to be in any danger. Jimmy confessed that he almost couldn't hold on in the desert. The only thing that kept him going was thinking of Kim, but he didn't share the specific details with her. Kim scolded Jimmy, saying it wasn't worth it to do so much for Lalo. Jimmy told her to check the bag he brought home, as it contained the $100,000 commission he earned. Careful, Kim also noticed the cup Jimmy brought back. Seeing the bullet hole in it, she realized Jimmy had encountered danger. Meanwhile, Mike reported to Gus. He sketched up the tattoos he saw on the robbers. Gus realized these men were hired hands. Mike wondered who the employer was. Gus then made a call to his superior in the cartel, Juan. Through a brief conversation, Gus confirmed that Juan was the employer. Juan did this to prevent Lalo from being released. On the surface, Juan claimed it was to protect Gus's business, but in reality, he was safeguarding his own interests. When the cousins went to retrieve the $7 million for Lalo's bail, someone had already tipped off Juan. However, Juan didn't know Gus's true intentions. Gus's goal was to drive the Salamancas back to their homeland in Mexico, allowing him to expand his operations in the north. Mike understood Gus's intentions and prepared to leave. At that moment, Mike remembered he had one more thing to report, the matter concerning Nacho. Mike felt that Nacho had completed his mission and deserved to be let go. It was clear Mike was speaking up for Nacho. Mike had dealt with Nacho before and knew he was a man who cared deeply for his father. Mike saw the good in Nacho, much like he saw the goodness in his own son, but Gus didn't agree. He thought it would be better to keep Nacho as his eyes and ears in Salamanca. Mike disagreed with Gus using Nacho's father as leverage. He believed Gus should recruit Nacho by offering him happiness. However, Gus didn't trust Nacho, because back when the incident with Hector occurred, Gus had discovered that Nacho was behind it. Ultimately, Mike was just an employee and couldn't change Nacho's fate. Nacho reported Lalo's next moves to Gus and expressed his desire to end their agreement, but Gus refused. The next day, Jimmy, still recovering, gets another call from a client. Kim wanted him to rest at home, but Jimmy insisted on going because the case was urgent and he couldn't abandon his client. Kim suddenly confessed about the situation Jimmy faced in the desert. She explained she wasn't blaming him for keeping it secret. She just wanted him to know she was always there for him. Seeing his understanding, caring, and beautiful wife, Jimmy admitted that he had gone through a terrifying ordeal, but he only vaguely mentioned drinking iced tea. He didn't want Kim to worry about him. After Jimmy left, Kim went to work at SC law firm. After what had happened, she couldn't focus on her work. Kim looked at the room full of Mesa Verde Bank trophies, but they couldn't compare to a thank you letter from someone she had helped. She suddenly realized what she truly needed, so Kim decisively resigned from her job. Then, Kim asked her assistant to send her some pro bono community cases. That was what she genuinely wanted to do. Before leaving, Kim remembered there was one thing she hadn't taken, the stopper from the bottle of Zafiro Anejo. From her and Jimmy's first con, this item was to Kim what Marco's ring was to Jimmy. Whenever they appeared, their way of doing things would break the rules. Before fleeing, Lalo visited the nursing home to say goodbye to Hector. He explained his situation to his uncle and promised he wouldn't let Gus off so easily. Before leaving, he would ensure everything here was taken care of. The Salamanca family, though ruthless, had a bond and unity that many envied. Lalo was finally preparing to withdraw from the north, unaware that Gus's men were watching his every move. Nacho drove Lalo to the border, passing the spot where Jimmy was robbed, now completely cleaned up by Gus's men. Soon, they arrived at the rendezvous point, the same place where Jimmy had received the 7 million from the cousins. Lalo told Nacho he didn't need to wait, as his cousins would come to pick him up. However, just as Nacho was about to leave, Lalo suddenly thought of something Jimmy had said. He got back into Nacho's car and told him to drive slowly to check the spot where Jimmy's car had broken down. Following the tire tracks, Lalo quickly found the car Jimmy had pushed into the ditch. He jumped down to inspect it and, sure enough, found bullet holes. To get to the bottom of things, Lalo decided to return to Albuquerque and confront Jimmy. Meanwhile, Jimmy, not in the best state, lost a case he should have won. As a result, he was ridiculed by Bill. Thinking back, it was always Jimmy mocking others. Slip and Jimmy had never been laughed at like this before. Jimmy couldn't get over it. He found Mike and complained about the mess he was in. Mike could see how bad Jimmy was feeling. He told Jimmy that this was the path he had unknowingly chosen, and since he was already on it, he couldn't change the fact but had to try to adapt to it. Not finding the answer he wanted, Jimmy stormed out of the car. What Jimmy didn't know was that the dangerous Lalo was already on his way back to find him.